The gentle glow of sunset bathes the quiet village of Milbrook in amber light. 7 children stand in a row at the edge of a field, their silhouettes stark against the dimming sky. They hold hands, forming a chain of innocence against the backdrop of a world at war. The year is 1915, and while battles rage across the ocean, this small American town remains untouched by the horrors of conflict, or so it seems. Our narrator speaks in a hushed, contemplative tone. Milbrook, Pennsylvania. September 1915, a place where time seemed to move more slowly than elsewhere, where children still played freely in fields golden with wheat, and mothers hung laundry on lines stretched between apple trees heavy with fruit. The Great War was something that happened elsewhere, in distant lands with foreign names that the townsfolk struggled to pronounce. The camera pans slowly across the faces of 7 children, aged between 8 and 12, standing hand in hand at the edge of the woods. They wear the simple, practical clothing of rural children in 1915, boys in caps, suspenders, and short pants, girls in pinafores and dresses that reach below their knees. Their faces are solemn, eyes fixed on something beyond the frame. These 7 children were inseparable that summer, the summer before everything changed, before the shadows that had always lingered at the edges of Milbrook crept closer to its heart. We moved down the line of children, introducing each one. First was Thomas Wilson, the mayor's son. At 12 years old, he was the eldest and considered himself their leader. Thomas had his father's commanding presence and his mother's kind eyes. He dreamed of becoming a doctor someday, of healing the sick and wounded. Thomas, a boy with sandy hair and serious eyes, stands at the leftmost position. He squeezes the hand of the girl beside him, offering reassurance. Beside him stood Eleanor Abbott, whose father owned the town's only automobile. 11 years old and already displaying the grace her mother had instilled in her through countless hours of piano lessons and etiquette training. Eleanor's golden curls were always perfectly arranged beneath her ribbon, and her dresses were always immaculate, even after hours of play. Eleanor, with blonde ringlets and a crisp white dress, gives a small, nervous smile. Next was Robert Caldwell, known to everyone simply as Bobby. His father worked at the steel mill in the neighboring town, coming home each evening with coal dust embedded in the lines of his face. Bobby was quick to laugh and quicker still to jump into any adventure. At 10 years old, he carried a pocket full of marbles and a head full of dreams. Bobby, freckle-faced and grinning despite the solemnity of the moment, shifts from foot to foot, unable to contain his energy. Sarah Jenkins held Bobby's hand tightly. The daughter of the town's school teacher, Sarah was studious and thoughtful. Her wire-rimmed spectacles were constantly sliding down her nose, and she was never seen without a book tucked under her arm. At 9 years old, she already knew she wanted to follow in her father's footsteps and teach the next generation. Sarah adjusts her glasses with her free hand, her expression serious beyond her years. Then there was James Parker, whose family had moved to Milbrook only the previous spring. Though initially an outsider, his skill with a slingshot and willingness to share the candies his grandmother sent from Philadelphia had quickly earned him acceptance. At 9 years old, James still carried the slight accent of his Baltimore upbringing. James, slight but wiry, with dark hair falling across his forehead, looks around as if constantly assessing his surroundings. Beside James stood the youngest of the group, Lucy Hammond. Only 8 years old, with auburn braids and a splash of freckles across her nose, Lucy was beloved by all. Her father ran the town's general store, ensuring Lucy always had the newest pencils and prettiest hair ribbons. Despite these small luxuries, Lucy remained humble and kind, sharing whatever she had with her friends. Lucy, small for her age, with bright eyes and a spattering of freckles, clutches James's hand with one hand and with the other reaches for the 7th child. The camera lingers on the space between Lucy and the 7th child. Their hands are joined, but there's a hesitation, a tension in Lucy's posture. And finally there was Edward Sullivan. Edward, who had arrived in Milbrook under the cover of night 3 months earlier, accompanied by his uncle, Michael Sullivan, a man of few words who had purchased the old Thatcher house at the edge of town. Edward, whose left sleeve hung empty at his side. The camera finally reveals the 7th child. Edward, thin and pale, with dark circles under his eyes, stares directly into the camera. His right hand holds Lucy's, but his left arm ends at the elbow, the sleeve of his shirt neatly pinned up. These 7 children, bound together by friendship and the simple joys of childhood, were about to discover that even in Milbrook, shadows could take form, that sometimes the most terrifying monsters weren't the ones from storybooks or distant battlefields, but those hiding in plain sight. The scene shifts to earlier that summer. It's June, and school has just let out for the holiday. The town square is bustling with activity. Women shopping at the general store, men gathered outside the barber shop discussing the war news, children racing through the streets, celebrating their newfound freedom. Thomas, Eleanor, Bobby, Sarah, James, and Lucy are gathered around the town's central gazebo, planning their summer adventures. With 3 whole months ahead of us, Thomas says, his voice carrying the authority he's inherited from his father, we need a headquarters, somewhere just for us. What about the old oak by Willow Creek? Suggests Bobby, bouncing on his heels. We could build a proper treehouse. Sarah pushes her glasses up her nose. My father says that land belongs to Mr. Sullivan now, the man who bought the Thatcher place. He's strange, Eleanor says, lowering her voice. My mother says he keeps to himself too much to be respectable. My pa says he came from the city, adds James. Says city folk are different. Lucy, who has been quietly listening, suddenly points. Look, there he is. And there's a boy with him. The children turn to see Michael Sullivan, a tall, lean man in his 40s with a severe expression, walking toward the general store. Beside him is a boy about their age, thin and pale, dressed in clothes that seem too large for his frame. Most noticeably, his left sleeve is pinned up at the elbow. He's only got one arm, whispers Bobby, eyes wide. Robert Caldwell, Sarah scolds. It's rude to point that out. As the man and boy approach the store, Mr. Hammond, Lucy's father, greets them at the door. The children watch as pleasantries are exchanged, and then Mr. Sullivan gestures to the boy, saying something the children can't hear. Mr. Hammond smiles kindly at the boy, who keeps his eyes fixed on the ground. That must be his nephew, Thomas says. My father mentioned Mr. Sullivan was raising his brother's son. What happened to his parents? Asks Eleanor. Thomas shrugs. Father didn't say. The children continue to watch as Mr. Sullivan and the boy enter the store. Through the window they can see Mr. Hammond showing the boy some candies, but the child seems reluctant to choose one, constantly looking back at his uncle for permission. He looks lonely, Lucy says simply. Before any of the others can respond, Lucy is off, marching determinedly toward the store. The rest exchange glances and hurry after her. Inside the general store, the bell above the door jingles as the children enter. Mr. Hammond looks up from behind the counter and smiles. Well, if it isn't my favorite customers, he says warmly. Lucy, darling, I was wondering when you'd come by today. Lucy, however, has eyes only for the boy standing quietly beside Mr. Sullivan. She approaches directly, showing none of the hesitation an adult might. Hello, she says brightly. I'm Lucy Hammond. This is my father's store. Would you like to play with us? The boy looks startled, his eyes darting to his uncle. Mr. Sullivan's expression remains neutral, but there's a tightening around his eyes. Edward, he says, his voice surprisingly soft for such a stern-looking man. Why don't you introduce yourself? The boy swallows visibly. I'm Edward Sullivan, he says, his voice barely above a whisper. Pleased to meet you. We're going to build a treehouse this summer, Lucy continues, undeterred by Edward's shyness. You should help us. Edward looks again at his uncle, who gives a small nod. You may join them, Edward, if you wish, Mr. Sullivan says. Just be home before supper. A flicker of surprise crosses Edward's face, quickly replaced by cautious hope. Yes, Uncle Michael. And so, with that simple exchange, 7 became the number that defined that summer in Milbrook. 7 children, 7 different stories, 7 paths converging in the golden days of June 1915. The narrator's voice returns, now tinged with foreboding. It began innocently enough. 7 children building a treehouse, sharing secrets, creating a world of their own far from adult concerns. None of them could have known then what shadows lurked beneath the surface of their newfound friendship. None of them could have foreseen the consequences of the questions they didn't think to ask. The scene shifts to the children working on their treehouse. It's a sturdy old oak with branches thick enough to support their construction. Thomas directs operations from below, while Bobby and James scramble through the branches, hammering boards into place. Sarah sits beneath the tree with a notebook, sketching plans and making lists of supplies. Eleanor and Lucy sort through the materials they've gathered, discarded planks from the lumber yard, nails salvaged from old crates, rope donated by the fishing supply store. Edward stands slightly apart, watching. His right hand fidgets with the hem of his shirt. Thomas notices and approaches him. You can help Eleanor and Lucy sort the nails if you want, he offers. Edward nods and moves to join the girls. He kneels beside them and begins separating bent nails from straight ones, using his right hand deftly. "What happened to your arm?" Bobby calls down from the tree, unable to contain his curiosity any longer. "Bobby!" Sarah exclaims, scandalized. Edward freezes, his face paling even further. For a moment, it seems he might flee. "You don't have to answer that," Thomas says quickly, shooting Bobby a warning look. "It's all right," Edward says softly. I was born this way." The children absorb this information with the straightforward acceptance that children often show. "Can you climb trees?" James asks practically. A ghost of a smile touches Edward's lips. "I can. Not as fast as you, maybe, but I manage." "Well then," Thomas declares, "you can be in charge of testing the boards. Make sure they're secure before we nail them permanently." And just like that, Edward has a role, a purpose within the group. The tension eases and the work continues. But the narrator's voice slides in again, reminding viewers that all is not as simple as it seems. Children adapt quickly, accept easily. It's a gift adults often lose with the years. But acceptance without understanding can be dangerous. Questions unasked leave room for secrets to grow, for darkness to spread unseen. As the summer progresses, the treehouse takes shape. It becomes their sanctuary, their castle, their ship sailing through imaginary seas. They spend long days there, telling stories, playing games, escaping the heat of the summer sun beneath the oak's broad leaves. Edward gradually becomes more comfortable with the group. He's quiet but observant, often noticing things the others miss. He has a talent for whittling, using his knife one-handed to create small, intricate figures from fallen branches. Birds, rabbits, foxes that he gives to the others as gifts. But there are moments when a shadow passes over his face, when his eyes grow distant and haunted. Moments when the others catch him staring into the woods with an expression of dread. Moments when a sudden sound makes him flinch violently. One afternoon in early July, the children are gathered in the treehouse. Rain patters on the roof they've constructed from overlapping boards, creating a cozy, enclosed feeling. Bobby has brought a lantern, which casts long shadows on the walls. "Let's tell ghost stories," he suggests, placing the lantern in the center of their circle. "I don't know," Sarah says hesitantly, glancing at Lucy, the youngest. "Maybe something less frightening." "I'm not scared," Lucy insists, though she edges closer to Eleanor. "I know a good one," James offers. "My grandfather told me about a man back in Baltimore who lost his hand in an accident at the docks." Edward stiffens almost imperceptibly, but Thomas notices. "Maybe a different story," he suggests. "No, it's fine," Edward says quietly. "Go ahead, James." James, encouraged, leans forward, his face eerily lit from below by the lantern. "They say the man's hand was never found, eaten by the fish in the harbor most likely. But a week after the accident, workers at the dock began to disappear, one by one, and witnesses reported seeing a disembodied hand scuttling like a crab along the wharf at night, searching for its owner." Lucy squeals in delighted terror, while Sarah rolls her eyes. "That's scientifically impossible," she states flatly. "It's just a story, Sarah," Eleanor says, though she too has moved closer to Thomas. "I know a true story," Edward says suddenly, his voice so soft they all have to lean in to hear him. "About a boy who saw something he shouldn't have." The treehouse falls silent except for the patter of rain. Edward has never volunteered a story before. "What did he see?" Bobby asks, eyes wide. Edward's face is half in shadow, half illuminated by the lantern's glow. The boy lived with his parents in a big city. One night, he woke up and heard voices downstairs. Men's voices, angry. He crept to the top of the stairs and saw his father arguing with 3 men in suits. Edward's voice remains soft, but there's a new intensity to it. The other children listen, transfixed. The men wanted something his father had. The boy couldn't understand what it was. Just that his father kept saying he didn't have it anymore. The men got angrier. One of them pulled out a knife. Lucy gasps. Sarah puts an arm around her. The boy was scared, but he wanted to help his father. So he ran back to his room and got the whistle his grandfather had given him. He thought if he blew it, maybe someone would hear. Someone would come help. Edward pauses, swallowing hard. But when he got back to the stairs, it was too late. His father was on the floor and there was blood. So much blood. The rain seems to grow louder in the silence that follows. "What happened then?" James whispers. "The boy blew the whistle." Edward continues, blew it as hard as he could. The men looked up, saw him standing there. One of them started coming up the stairs. The boy ran to his parents' bedroom where his mother was sleeping. He tried to wake her, but she'd taken her medicine that made her sleep deeply. So what did he do? Bobby asks, completely captivated. He hid under the bed. He could see the men's shoes as they came into the room, could hear them talking about finding the brat and taking care of loose ends. His mother woke up then, started screaming when she saw the men. There were sounds of struggling, and then silence. Edward's face is now completely in shadow as he turns slightly away from the lantern. The boy stayed hidden until morning. When he finally crawled out, the house was empty. No mother, no father, no men in suits. Just blood, dried blood on the floors. He ran to a neighbor's house and they called the police. But they never found his parents, never found the men either. A heavy silence falls over the treehouse. Even the rain seems to have quieted. Is that a true story? Lucy asks finally, her voice small. Edward turns back to the group, his face once again partially illuminated. It's just a story, he says, with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Just a ghost story, like James's. The moment is broken by a distant call, Mr. Sullivan's voice, carrying through the rain, summoning Edward home. I have to go, Edward says, rising quickly. See you tomorrow. After he leaves, climbing down carefully despite his missing arm, the remaining children sit in uncomfortable silence. That was some story, Bobby says finally. It wasn't real, Sarah insists, though she sounds less certain than usual. It couldn't be. Of course not, Thomas agrees, but he exchanges a look with Eleanor that suggests neither is convinced. The narrator's voice returns, somber and knowing. Children understand more than adults give them credit for. They sense the currents that run beneath ordinary conversations, recognize the shadows behind casual smiles. But understanding brings responsibility, and responsibility is a heavy burden for young shoulders. The next day dawns bright and clear, the rain having washed the world clean. The children gather at the treehouse as usual, but there's a new undercurrent of tension. Edward is the last to arrive, and when he does, his face is bruised, a purple shadow blooming around his right eye. "Edward!" Lucy exclaims. "What happened?" Edward looks down, avoiding their eyes. "I fell, coming down from the treehouse yesterday. The rain made the branches slippery. It's an obvious lie, and they all know it. The ladder they've built is sturdy, the handholds secure, and the bruise is clearly from a blow, not a fall." Thomas exchanges glances with the others. "Edward," he begins carefully, "if someone hurt you—" "I said I fell," Edward interrupts, with uncharacteristic sharpness. Then, more softly, "Please, can we just play like normal?" The others reluctantly agree, but the carefree atmosphere of previous days is gone. They play half-heartedly, casting concerned glances at Edward when they think he won't notice. His story from the previous day hangs over them like a storm cloud. As the afternoon wears on, Lucy suggests they go berry picking. There's a patch of blackberries at the edge of the woods, ripe and sweet. The change of scene seems to lighten the mood, and soon they're all laughing again, competing to see who can fill their bucket fastest, their fingers and lips stained purple with juice. It's while they're picking berries that Sarah notices the scar. Edward has rolled up his right sleeve to keep it clean, revealing a thin, jagged line that runs from his wrist almost to his elbow. "Did you fall and get that too?" she asks quietly, when the others are out of earshot. Edward freezes, then slowly rolls his sleeve back down. "It's old," he says, "from before I came to Milbrook." Sarah hesitates, then asks the question that's been on all their minds. "Edward, that story you told yesterday, was it about you?" Edward's face closes like a shuttered window. "I told you, it was just a story. But your parents—" "My parents are dead," he says flatly. "That's all you need to know." Before Sarah can press further, there's a shout from Bobby. "Look what I found." The children gather around as Bobby proudly displays a bird's nest that has fallen from a tree, complete with 3 small blue eggs. "We should put it back," Lucy says immediately. "The mother will be looking for it." "The mother's probably gone," James argues. "These eggs are cold. We could keep them warm," suggests Eleanor. "Maybe they'll still hatch." As the others debate the fate of the eggs, Edward stands slightly apart, his expression unreadable. Thomas joins him. "You know you can tell us if something's wrong," he says quietly. "If someone's hurting you. My father's the mayor. He could help." Edward meets Thomas's eyes, and for a moment, something like hope flickers across his face. Then it's gone, replaced by resignation. "Your father can't help," he says. "No one can. Some things you just have to endure." Before Thomas can respond, there's a commotion from the others. One of the eggs has a crack in it. It's hatching. Lucy cries excitedly. The children crowd around, momentarily forgetting everything else in the wonder of new life emerging. But as they watch, it becomes clear that something is wrong. The crack widens, but no chick appears. Instead, a thick, dark liquid begins to ooze from the shell. "What is that?" Eleanor asks, wrinkling her nose. Bobby reaches out to touch it, but Sarah grabs his hand. "Don't! It might be diseased." The children back away from the nest, their earlier excitement curdling into disgust and disappointment. "We should bury them," Thomas decides. It's the respectful thing to do. As they dig a small hole and lay the nest inside, Edward watches with an expression of deep sadness. When Lucy begins to say a few words over the tiny grave, "Dear God, please take care of these baby birds that never got to fly," Edward abruptly turns and walks away. James finds him sitting by the creek, throwing stones into the water with his one hand. "You all right?" James asks, sitting beside him. Edward doesn't answer immediately. When he does, his voice is distant, as if he's speaking from somewhere far away. "Have you ever seen something die, James?" James thinks about it. "My granddad's old hound dog died last year. I was there when it happened." Edward nods. "Was it peaceful?" "I guess so. He just kind of stopped breathing. Granddad said he went to sleep and didn't wake up. That's a good way to go," Edward says. "Better than the alternative." James doesn't know how to respond to that, so they sit in silence for a while, watching the water flow past. "My uncle isn't a bad man," Edward says suddenly. "He took me in when no one else would. Gives me food, clothes, a roof. I shouldn't complain. But he hits you," James says. The words blunt in the way children's observations often are. Edward doesn't deny it. "Only when he drinks, and only when I remind him too much of my father." "That's not right," James says firmly. "My pa says a man who hits a child is no man at all." Edward gives a small, sad smile. "Your pa sounds like a good man." "He is," James agrees. Then, after a pause, "What was your pa like?" "I don't remember much," Edward lies. And they both know it's a lie. Just that he was tall, had a laugh that made the windows shake. They're quiet again for a while. Then Edward says, so softly James almost misses it, "I miss him. Every day." The scene shifts to later that evening. The Sullivan house, the old Thatcher place, stands at the edge of town, its windows glowing with lamplight against the gathering dusk. Inside, Edward and his uncle sit at the dinner table. Michael Sullivan is a neat, precise man. His shirt is crisp, his hair combed smoothly back from his forehead. He cuts his meat into perfect squares before eating each piece methodically. Edward mimics his uncle's precise movements as best he can with one hand. His fork occasionally slips, causing a jarring scrape against the plate. Each time this happens, Michael's jaw tightens a fraction more. "How was your day?" Michael asks, the question carrying the weight of ritual rather than genuine interest. "Fine, Uncle Michael," Edward replies quietly. "We picked blackberries. The Hammond girl and the others?" Edward nods. "Yes, sir." Michael takes a sip of water. Never alcohol at the dinner table, only after, and regards his nephew thoughtfully. "You've grown attached to them." It's not a question, but Edward answers anyway. "They're kind to me." "Kindness," Michael says, the word sounding foreign on his tongue, "is often a mask for curiosity. They tolerate your difference because it makes them feel virtuous, because it gives them something to whisper about when you're not there." Edward's hand tightens around his fork. "That's not true. They're my friends." Michael's expression doesn't change, but something in his eyes hardens. "You're naive, Edward, just like your father was, trusting when you should be wary. It will lead you to the same end, if you're not careful." Edward looks down at his plate, appetite gone. "May I be excused?" Michael considers for a moment, then nods. "Clear your plate first." Edward rises, takes his plate to the sink, and scrapes the remains of his dinner into the slop bucket. As he turns to leave the kitchen, Michael speaks again. "Have you been telling stories, Edward?" Edward freezes, one foot on the bottom stair. "Sir?" "Stories," Michael repeats. "About Chicago, about what happened there." "No, Uncle Michael," Edward says, but his voice wavers. Michael rises from the table, his movements deliberate, unhurried. "Are you lying to me, boy?" Edward turns to face his uncle, his face pale but composed. "No, sir." Michael studies him for a long moment, then nods slightly. "See that you don't. Some stories aren't meant to be told. Some secrets need to stay buried, for your safety as well as mine." Edward nods, relief washing over his features. "Yes, Uncle Michael, I understand." "Good," Michael says, returning to the table. "Good night, then." "Good night, Uncle Michael." Edward climbs the stairs to his small bedroom under the eaves. Once there, he moves to the window and looks out at the night sky, at the stars scattered like salt across black velvet. His expression is one of longing, of trapped desperation. From a loose floorboard beneath his bed, he retrieves a small metal whistle on a frayed cord. He holds it tightly in his hand, pressing it against his heart, before carefully returning it to its hiding place. The narrator's voice returns, heavy with foreboding. Secrets have weight. They press down on those who carry them, bending backs and breaking spirits. Edward's secret was heavier than most, a burden no child should have to bear alone. Yet bear it he did, through quiet dinners and long nights, through sunny days with friends who saw but didn't understand, until the day the weight became too much, and the truth began to seep through the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. July gives way to August, and the heat intensifies. The children spend their days by the creek, splashing in the cool water, or in the shade of the treehouse, playing cards and reading aloud from books borrowed from Sarah's father's extensive library. Edward continues to join them daily, and gradually, the bruise around his eye fades. His smiles come more readily, his laughter less restrained. For brief periods, he seems like any other child, unburdened by whatever shadows haunt him. But there are still moments when his guard slips, when something triggers a memory he'd rather forget, a loud noise that makes him duck instinctively, the sight of a man in a dark suit walking through town that causes him to vanish into the nearest alleyway, the distant sound of raised voices that brings a look of terror to his face. The other children notice these reactions, exchange worried glances, but follow Thomas's lead in not pressing Edward for explanations. They've made a tacit agreement to protect him however they can, even if they don't fully understand what they're protecting him from. One sweltering afternoon, the children decide to go swimming in the deeper part of the creek, where a natural pool has formed beneath a small waterfall. They've been eyeing it all summer, but only now, with August's heat making their clothes stick to their skin, have they worked up the courage to attempt it. Last one in is a rotten egg, Bobby shouts, already stripping down to his underclothes. The others follow suit, shedding outer layers until they're dressed only in their underwear, the boys in their undershorts, the girls in their chemises and bloomers, all except Edward, who hangs back, still fully clothed. "Aren't you coming in?" Lucy calls, already ankle-deep in the water. Edward shakes his head. "I'll just watch." "The water's wonderful," Eleanor encourages. "So cool." "I can't swim," Edward says, though something in his expression suggests this isn't the whole truth. Thomas, always observant, approaches him. "Is it because of your arm? I could help you. It's not that deep." Edward hesitates, clearly torn. The day is hot, the water inviting. "It's not just that," he admits finally. I don't want you to see." "See what?" "The rest of my arm. It's not pretty." Thomas considers this, then nods. "Wait here." He returns to the pile of discarded clothes and retrieves his own shirt. "You can keep this on," he offers. "It's already wet from sweat anyway. The sleeves are long enough to cover whatever you don't want us to see." Edward looks at the shirt, then at Thomas, gratitude evident in his eyes. "Thank you." A few minutes later, Edward joins the others in the water, Thomas's oversized shirt billowing around him. At first, he stays in the shallows, but gradually, with Thomas and James supporting him, he ventures deeper. His initial fear gives way to joy as he discovers he can float easily, his body naturally compensating for the missing limb. For an hour, the children play in the water, splashing, diving, floating on their backs to gaze at the sky through the canopy of leaves. Edward laughs more freely than they've ever heard him, his face alight with the simple pleasure of the moment. It's only when they finally tire and make their way back to the bank that the mood shifts. As Edward climbs out of the water, Thomas's shirt clings to his thin frame, revealing what it was meant to hide. Not just the stump of his left arm, but a network of scars that cover his chest and back, visible through the wet fabric. The other children try not to stare, but their shock is evident. These aren't the marks of a birth defect or a single accident. These are deliberate wounds, inflicted over time. Edward sees their expressions and immediately wraps his arm around himself, turning away. "I should go," he says, his voice tight with shame. "Edward, wait," Thomas begins, but Edward is already grabbing his clothes, backing away from them. "I have to go," he repeats more urgently now. "Please just forget what you saw." Before any of them can respond, he turns and runs, disappearing into the woods in the direction of the Sullivan house. The remaining children stand in stunned silence, dripping water onto the sun-baked earth. "Those were knife marks," James says finally, his voice unnaturally high. "I've seen something like it before, on a man who got in a fight at the docks." "And burns," Sarah adds quietly, like from a cigar. "We have to tell someone," Eleanor insists. "This isn't right." "Tell who?" Bobby asks. "And tell them what? That Edward has scars? That doesn't prove anything." "It proves someone hurt him," Lucy says, tears welling in her eyes. "Badly." Thomas, who has been quiet, finally speaks. I think it was the men from his story, the men who took his parents." The others look at him, waiting for him to continue. "Think about it," Thomas says. "He tells a story about a boy who sees men hurt his parents. Then we find out he has all these scars. And his uncle is always so watchful, like he's afraid of something, or someone." "You think the men are looking for Edward?" Sarah asks. "But why?" "Because he saw them," Thomas answers. "He's a witness. Maybe that's why his uncle brought him here, to hide him." "Then we shouldn't tell anyone," James says decisively. "If we do, the men might find out where he is." "But if his uncle is hurting him," Eleanor begins. "We don't know that," Thomas interrupts. "The scars could be old, from before he came here." They argue back and forth, these children suddenly faced with an adult problem that has no easy solution. In the end, they decide to wait, to watch, to try to get Edward to confide in them properly before they take any action. "We'll talk to him tomorrow," Thomas declares. "All of us together. Let him know he can trust us." But Edward doesn't come to the treehouse the next day, or the day after. By the third day of his absence, the children are worried enough to venture to the Sullivan house, a place they've always viewed with vague unease. It's a large Victorian structure, once grand but now showing signs of neglect. Paint peels from the clapboards, and several shutters hang askew. The garden, once the pride of Mrs. Thatcher, is overgrown with weeds. The children approach the front door with trepidation. Thomas, as their unofficial leader, knocks. After a long pause, the door opens to reveal Michael Sullivan. He's dressed in a waistcoat and shirt sleeves, his collar open at the throat. His expression is polite but distant. "Yes?" he inquires, looking down at the assembled children. "Good afternoon, Mr. Sullivan," Thomas says, summoning the confidence that comes from being the mayor's son. "We were wondering if Edward might like to come out and play. We haven't seen him for a few days." Something flickers across Michael's face. Surprise, perhaps, or calculation. "Edward is unwell," he says smoothly. "A summer cold. I'm keeping him in bed until the fever breaks." "Could we see him?" Lucy asks innocently. "We brought him some blackberries." She holds up a small basket of fruit picked that morning. Michael's smile doesn't reach his eyes. "That's very thoughtful, but I'm afraid he's contagious. Best to keep your distance for now. I'll tell him you came by." He begins to close the door, but Thomas puts his foot in the gap, a bold move that surprises even himself. "When do you think he'll be well enough to join us again?" Michael's expression hardens. "That's difficult to say. Childhood illnesses can be unpredictable. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have matters to attend to." This time, when he pushes the door, Thomas withdraws his foot, and the heavy oak panel closes firmly in their faces. The children retreat to the edge of the property before speaking. "He's lying," James says immediately. "Edward isn't sick." "You don't know that," Sarah counters, always the voice of reason. "People do catch colds even in summer." "Didn't you see Mr. Sullivan's face when Thomas asked when Edward would be better?" Eleanor asks. He wasn't expecting that question. He didn't have an answer prepared. "I think Edward's in trouble," Lucy says simply. "I think we need to help him." The others look at her, then at the forbidding house with its blank windows staring back at them like empty eyes. "How?" Bobby asks. "Mr. Sullivan won't even let us see him." Thomas is thoughtful. "We need to get a message to Edward somehow. Let him know we're here for him, that we want to help." "We could write a note," suggests Sarah. "Tie it to a stone and throw it through his window." "Which window is his?" James asks practically. None of them know. "We could leave something at the treehouse," Eleanor offers. "Something that would let him know we've been there, that we're waiting for him." Like what? Bobby asks. Like this, Lucy says, reaching into her pocket and pulling out a small wooden fox, one of the carvings Edward had made for her. We can leave it somewhere, he'll find it. Thomas nods slowly. That might work, but how do we know he'll even come to the treehouse? If his uncle is keeping him home, we need to watch the house, James decides. Take turns. See if Edward comes out or if anything unusual happens. And so begins the children's vigil. They establish a rotation, always making sure at least one of them has eyes on the Sullivan house, from dawn until dusk. They're careful not to be obvious, hiding behind trees or pretending to be engaged in innocent play while keeping the house in their peripheral vision. 3 more days pass with no sign of Edward. The children's worry deepens. Twice they see Michael Sullivan leave the house, locking the door behind him. Once he returns with groceries, the second time with what appears to be a bottle wrapped in brown paper. On the 4th day of their watch, it's Sarah's turn to monitor the house. She's positioned herself beneath a tree with a book, appearing to read while actually keeping close watch on the Sullivan residence. Around midday, she sees movement at an upstairs window, a pale face peering out briefly before disappearing again. She waits until Michael Sullivan leaves the house before approaching. Standing beneath what she now knows to be Edward's window, she calls up softly, "Edward, it's Sarah. Are you all right?" After a moment, the window opens a crack. Edward's face appears, thinner than she remembers, with dark circles under his eyes. "Sarah," he whispers, "you shouldn't be here." "If my uncle sees you, we're worried about you," she interrupts. "Are you really sick?" Edward hesitates, then shakes his head. "He won't let me out. Not since the creek." "Why not?" "He says I've been careless, that I've put us both in danger." Edward's voice trembles. "Sarah, I think he's going to take me away again. I heard him on the telephone making arrangements." "Away where?" "I don't know. Somewhere else, somewhere new. We've moved 3 times already since Chicago." Sarah's mind races. "Edward, those scars we saw, did your uncle do that to you?" Edward's eyes widen in fear. No, it wasn't him. It was them. The men I told you about in my story. Only it wasn't just a story." "The men who took your parents?" Edward nods, his face a mask of grief. "They wanted something my father had. Information, I think, about their business. He was an accountant for a big company in Chicago. I think he found out they were doing something illegal, and they hurt you to try to make him tell." Edward looks away. "They hurt me to punish him for not telling. They said each mark on me was a reminder of what happens to people who cross them, that he should look at me and remember the cost of his silence." Sarah feels sick. "Edward, we need to tell someone. The police." "No!" Edward's voice rises in panic. "No police. The men. They have friends in the police. That's what my uncle says. That's why we keep moving, keep hiding." "The police can't help us." "Then my father," Sarah suggests. "He's a teacher, but he knows people, important people in the county." Edward shakes his head. "It's too dangerous. For you, for your family. These men, they don't just hurt people. They kill them, like they killed my parents." The sound of a wagon approaching makes them both freeze. Michael Sullivan is returning earlier than expected. "I have to go," Edward whispers urgently. "Don't tell anyone what I said. Please, Sarah, promise me." "But, promise." "I promise," Sarah says reluctantly. "But Edward, we want to help you. All of us. Whatever happens, remember that." Edward gives her a sad smile. "You already have. You've been my friends. That's more than I've had in a long time." He closes the window just as Michael Sullivan's wagon turns into the drive. Sarah ducks behind a bush, her heart pounding, and waits until Michael has entered the house before slipping away. That evening, the children gather in the treehouse to hear Sarah's report. The mood is somber as she relates her conversation with Edward. "So it's true," Thomas says when she finishes. "The story he told us that night. It really happened to him." "He's in danger," Eleanor says, stating what they all now realize. "Real danger. And his uncle is going to take him away," adds Bobby. "Maybe as soon as tomorrow." "We can't let that happen," Lucy declares. "Edward belongs here, with us." "But what can we do?" James asks. "We're just kids. Those men Edward talked about, they sound like gangsters, like the ones in the moving pictures. Maybe we can convince Edward's uncle to stay," suggests Thomas. "My father could offer him a job at the town hall, make it worth his while to settle in Milbrook permanently. Or we could help them hide better," Bobby offers. "There are caves in the hills that hardly anyone knows about. My pa showed me one last hunting season. The children continue to throw out ideas, each less practical than the last. It's Sarah who finally brings them back to reality. "I think," she says slowly, "that what Edward needs most right now is to know he's not alone, that someone believes him, believes his story." "We all believe him," Lucy says immediately. "Yes, but does he know that? Really know it?" Sarah looks around at her friends. "I think we need to show him. Tonight." "How?" asks James. Sarah's expression grows determined. "We're going to get him out of that house. The plan they devise is simple but risky. Under cover of darkness, they will approach the Sullivan house. While Thomas creates a distraction at the front, James will climb the oak tree that grows close to what they now know is Edward's window. Once there, he'll help Edward climb out and down the tree. They'll all escape to the treehouse, where they can figure out their next move." "What kind of distraction?" Thomas asks. "Something that will keep Mr. Sullivan occupied for at least a few minutes," Sarah says. "Something he can't ignore." "Fire," suggests Bobby, always the most daring. "We could set a small fire in the garden." "Absolutely not," Eleanor says firmly. "We want to create a distraction, not burn down the house with Edward inside it." After much debate, they settle on a compromise. Thomas will throw a rock through the front parlor window, then run away, making as much noise as possible, leading Michael Sullivan on a chase away from the house and the oak tree. As night falls, the 6 children make their way through the darkened streets of Milbrook, moving as silently as shadows. The Sullivan house looms against the starlit sky, a single lamp burning in the downstairs window. "Remember," Thomas whispers as they crouch in the bushes at the edge of the property, "wait until Mr. Sullivan is chasing me before you approach the tree. And if anything goes wrong, run. Meet back at the treehouse." The others nod solemnly. Thomas picks up a rock, takes a deep breath, and darts across the lawn. The crash of breaking glass shatters the night's stillness, followed immediately by Thomas's shout, "Hey, Mr. Sullivan, come and get me," and the sound of running feet. A moment later, the front door flies open, and Michael Sullivan emerges, a lamp in one hand. "Who's there?" he calls, his voice tight with anger. "Over here," Thomas taunts from the road. "Bet you can't catch me." Sullivan hesitates for only a moment before setting down the lamp and giving chase, his long legs carrying him swiftly across the lawn. The moment he disappears from view, James darts to the oak tree and begins to climb, his nimble hands finding purchase on the rough bark. The others spread out around the property, keeping watch. James reaches the branch that extends closest to Edward's window and edges along it carefully. When he's as close as he can get, he taps gently on the glass. The window opens almost immediately. Edward's face appears pale in the moonlight. "James," he whispers, "what are you doing here?" "Rescuing you," James replies simply. "Come on, we don't have much time." Edward looks uncertain. "I can't. My uncle is chasing Thomas right now." "This is our chance. Please, Edward, we want to help you." Edward hesitates a moment longer, then nods. "All right, but I need to get something first." He disappears back into the room. When he returns, he's clutching something small in his hand. The whistle, though James doesn't recognize it as such in the darkness. "How do I get across?" Edward asks, eyeing the gap between window and branch. "I'll hold onto the window frame," James says. "You climb over me, onto the branch." It's a precarious maneuver, made more challenging by Edward's missing arm, but desperation lends them both strength and balance. Soon Edward is on the branch beside James, his breathing quick and shallow. "Now we climb down," James instructs. "I'll go first. Show you where to put your feet." They descend the tree as quickly as caution allows. When they reach the lowest branch, still a good 6 feet from the ground, they hear a shout from the road. "He's coming back," Bobby's urgent whisper carries across the lawn. "Jump," James tells Edward. "The others will catch you." Edward hesitates, then leaps into the darkness. There's a muffled thump, a stifled cry of pain, then Sarah's voice. "We've got him! Come on, James!" James jumps just as the beam of a lamp sweeps across the yard. He lands hard, rolling to absorb the impact, then is pulled to his feet by Bobby. "Run!" Bobby hisses, and the children flee, half carrying Edward, whose ankle appears to have been twisted in the fall. They make it to the tree line before they hear Michael Sullivan's shout of rage from the house. He's discovered Edward's empty room, but by then they're moving through the woods, sure-footed despite the darkness, having played in these trees all summer. They reach the treehouse breathless and trembling with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Once inside, Bobby lights a lantern, casting a warm glow over their flushed faces. Edward sits in the corner, cradling his left ankle with his right hand. His face is a mixture of gratitude and terror. "He'll come looking for me," he says. "He'll be so angry." "Let him be angry," Thomas says, returning from his diversion, his clothes torn from running through brambles. "You're safe with us now." "No one's safe," Edward murmurs. "Not from them." "The men who hurt you?" Sarah asks gently. Edward nods. "My uncle is right about one thing. They're still looking for me. They have to be. I'm the only witness to what they did." "Then we'll hide you," Lucy declares with the simple conviction of a child. "Somewhere they can never find you." Edward gives her a sad smile. "There is no such place. Not for long. They have money, connections. They found us in Detroit. They found us in Cincinnati. It's only a matter of time before they find us here." "What about the police in the big city?" suggests Eleanor. "Surely they could protect you." Edward shakes his head. "The men, they're part of something bigger. An organization. They have police officers on their payroll. At least that's what my uncle says." "Do you trust your uncle?" Thomas asks suddenly. Edward considers the question. "I don't know anymore. He's hard, cruel sometimes, especially when he drinks. But he's kept me alive, kept me hidden." "Is that why he hits you?" Bobby asks bluntly. "To keep you hidden?" Edward looks down. He says I draw attention, that I need to be taught to be invisible. His voice drops to a whisper. "Sometimes I think he wishes I had died with my parents, that I'm just a burden to him." "You're not a burden," Lucy says fiercely. "You're our friend." Edward looks up, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "You don't understand. My uncle, he's right to be afraid. These men, they won't stop. They're like wolves. Once they have your scent, they hunt you down, no matter how long it takes." "Why?" James asks. "What could be so important that they'd chase a little boy across the country?" Edward pulls something from his pocket, the small metal whistle on its frayed cord. "This," he says simply. The children stare at it, uncomprehending. "It's a whistle," Bobby says finally. "Like the one in your story." Edward nods. "My grandfather's whistle. But it's not just a whistle." He turns it over in his hand, revealing a small seam in the metal. With his thumbnail, he pries it open. Inside is a tiny key. "My father gave me this the night the men came. Told me to hide it, keep it safe. Said that when the time was right, I'd know what to do with it." Edward's voice is distant, lost in memory. "I think it opens something. Something the men want very badly." "Like a treasure chest?" Bobby asks, eyes wide. "Or a safety deposit box," suggests Thomas more practically. "At a bank." "I don't know," Edward admits. "My father never told me." "And now you're the only one who knows about it," Sarah finishes for him. Edward nods, closing the whistle and returning it to his pocket. "My uncle doesn't even know. I've never shown it to him. I was afraid he might give it to them, if they offered him enough money." The children are silent, absorbing this information. It's a burden too heavy for young shoulders, a story too dark for their sunny summer days. And yet here it is, in their treehouse, in the form of a one-armed boy with haunted eyes. "What are you going to do?" Eleanor asks finally. Edward looks around at their faces. These children who have accepted him, protected him, risked punishment to rescue him. "I don't know," he says honestly. "Keep running, I suppose. It's all I've done since Chicago." "You could stay here," Lucy suggests. "With us, in Milbrook. My uncle would never allow it. And without him, I have nowhere to go." "My father could help," Thomas offers again. "He knows people, important people." Edward shakes his head. "Your father's authority ends at the town limits. These men, their reach is much longer." The conversation is interrupted by a sound from below, the crack of a twig, the rustle of leaves. The children freeze, extinguishing the lantern. In the sudden darkness, their breathing seems unnaturally loud. "Edward?" Michael Sullivan's voice carries up to them, deceptively calm. "I know you're up there, boy. Come down now, and we'll say no more about this foolishness." Edward begins to tremble. The others exchange glances, visible only as the faintest outlines in the darkness. "I'll handle this," Thomas whispers, moving toward the trapdoor that serves as the treehouse entrance. "No." Edward stops him with a hand on his arm. "He's my uncle. My responsibility." Before the others can protest, Edward moves to the trapdoor and calls down. "I'm here, Uncle Michael." "Come down," Sullivan repeats. "We need to leave tonight. It's no longer safe here." "Why tonight?" Edward asks, stalling. "What's happened?" There's a pause before Sullivan answers, and when he does, his voice has lost its calm edge. "There was a telephone call from a man asking about a boy with one arm. A boy traveling with his uncle. They've traced us, Edward. We have to go. Now. The children can hear the genuine fear in Sullivan's voice. It matches the terror that flashes across Edward's face. How? Edward whispers. How did they find us again? It doesn't matter, Sullivan says impatiently. What matters is getting away before they arrive. I've packed your things. The wagon is ready. Edward looks back at his friends, his expression torn. I have to go with him, he says softly. You understand that, don't you? I can't stay. I can't put you all in danger. But Edward, Lucy begins. No, Lucy, Edward interrupts gently. This is goodbye, for your safety as much as mine. One by one he embraces them. Awkward, one-armed hugs that nonetheless convey the depth of his feeling. To Thomas he whispers, thank you for making me feel normal. To Sarah, thank you for believing me. To James, thank you for teaching me to climb. To Bobby, thank you for making me laugh. To Eleanor, thank you for your kindness. And to Lucy, the youngest, he simply says, don't forget me. Then, with a final look around the treehouse that has been his sanctuary for one brief summer, Edward descends the ladder to where his uncle waits. The children crowd to the small window, watching as Edward and Michael Sullivan walk away, two dark figures growing smaller in the moonlight. Just before they disappear into the trees, Edward turns and raises his hand in a final farewell. And then, they are gone, leaving the children with a treehouse that suddenly seems emptier, and a summer that has lost its golden glow. The narrator's voice returns, somber and reflective. Children grow up in sudden leaps, in moments when innocence falls away, and the adult world, with all its complexities and dangers, comes sharply into focus. For these six, that moment came on a summer night in 1915, as they watched their friend walk away to face shadows they could only dimly comprehend. The scene shifts to the next morning. The children gather at the treehouse, subdued and uncertain. The Sullivan house stands empty, the wagon gone, the doors locked. It's as if Edward and his uncle were never there at all. What do we do now? Bobby asks, voicing the question on all their minds. There's nothing we can do, Thomas says with a new maturity in his voice. Edward's gone. We have to accept that. But those men are after him, Lucy protests. The bad men who hurt him. We can't just let them find him again. We don't have a choice, Sarah says gently. We don't know where he's gone. Even if we did, what could we do? We're just children. We could tell someone, suggests Eleanor. Your father, Thomas, or the sheriff. Thomas shakes his head. And tell them what? That our friend ran away with his uncle because bad men from Chicago are chasing them? Without Edward here to tell his story, to show his scars, they'd never believe us. So we just forget him? James asks, anger edging his voice. Pretend he was never here? No, Thomas says firmly. We remember him, and we keep his secret. The whistle, the key, the men from Chicago. We don't tell anyone, for Edward's safety. The others nod solemnly. It's a heavy burden, but one they'll bear together. As the final days of August slip away, the children try to recapture the carefree spirit of early summer. They swim in the creek, add new features to the treehouse, pick the last of the season's blackberries. But there's a hollow quality to their play now, a shadow that falls across even the sunniest days. Edward's absence is a presence in itself, a silent seventh member of their group that they carry with them wherever they go. And then, just as they're beginning to adjust to the new normal, to accept that Edward is gone from their lives forever, something happens that shatters their fragile peace. It's the last week of August, and the children are in the treehouse, playing a desultory game of cards. The air is thick with approaching rain, the sky a uniform gray that matches their mood. I wish school wouldn't start so soon, sighs Bobby, laying down a card without his usual enthusiasm. I think I'm ready for it, Eleanor admits. The days feel too empty now. The others nod in understanding. Without Edward, without the mystery and mission of protecting him, the summer has lost its purpose. A sound from below makes them all look up. Footsteps, too heavy to be an animal, too deliberate to be the wind in the leaves. Hello? Thomas calls, moving to the window. Who's there? There's no answer, but the footsteps continue, circling the base of the tree. Maybe it's Edward, Lucy whispers, hope lighting her face. Maybe he came back, but deep down, they all know it isn't Edward. The footsteps are too confident, too unhurried. Edward moved through the world as if trying not to be noticed, his steps quick and light. James moves to the trapdoor, secures the latch they installed after Edward's departure. The others gather together in the center of the treehouse, instinctively seeking safety and proximity. The footsteps stop directly beneath the trapdoor. There's a moment of silence, then a voice calls up, smooth, cultured, with a city accent that sounds foreign in these rural woods. "Good afternoon, children. I wonder if you might help me. I'm looking for a boy named Edward Sullivan. I believe he was a friend of yours." The children exchange alarmed glances. "This isn't Michael Sullivan. This is a stranger, asking about Edward, a man from the city." Thomas puts a finger to his lips, signaling the others to remain silent. But Lucy, the youngest and most trusting, calls out before he can stop her. "Edward's gone. He and his uncle left town." There's a pause. Then the voice returns, still pleasant but with an undercurrent of something cold. Did they now? And did Edward happen to mention where they were going? This time, none of the children respond. They've realized their mistake, understood the danger in this smooth-voiced stranger with his too casual questions. "Children?" the voice prompts. "I'm an old family friend. Edward's father and I worked together in Chicago. I've been very worried about the boy since the unfortunate incident with his parents. If you're his friend," Thomas calls finally, his voice steadier than he feels, "then you know what happened to his arm." Another pause, longer this time. When the voice comes again, the false warmth has disappeared, replaced by flat efficiency. "I don't have time for games. The boy has something that belongs to my employer, something valuable. Tell me where he's gone, and I'll make it worth your while. $5 each. That's a lot of money for children your age." "We don't know where he went," Sarah calls, her voice trembling despite her attempt at bravery. "His uncle just took him away one night. They didn't say where they were going." "I think you know more than you're telling me," the voice says. "Children always know more than adults give them credit for. Now, I'm going to count to 3, and then I'm coming up there. 1. The children look around desperately for some means of escape, but there is none. The treehouse has only the one entrance, and the man is directly beneath it. 2. Thomas spots the pile of rocks they've collected for their slingshots. He grabs one, moves to the window. 3. The trapdoor shudders as something heavy strikes it from below. The latch holds, but barely. Another blow like that and it will give way. Thomas takes careful aim and throws the rock as hard as he can, not at the man, but into the bushes some distance away. The resulting crash and rustle of leaves has the desired effect. The pounding on the trapdoor stops. "Who's there?" the voice calls sharply, all pretense of friendliness gone. Thomas signals to the others, and they all begin throwing rocks in different directions, creating the illusion of movement in the woods surrounding the treehouse. "Hey, you there! Stop!" the man shouts, and they hear his footsteps moving away from the tree, pursuing the phantom sounds. "Now," Thomas whispers urgently. While he's distracted, James quickly unlatches the trapdoor. One by one, the children descend the ladder as quietly as possible. Once on the ground, they run, not back toward town where the man might easily find them, but deeper into the woods, toward the creek and the swimming hole. They don't stop running until they reach the water's edge, their lungs burning, legs trembling with exertion and fear. "That was one of them," Bobby gasps when he can finally speak. "One of the men from Edward's story. He's found Milbrook," Eleanor says, her face pale with shock. "He's found us." "But Edward's gone," Lucy points out. "He's safe, right?" Thomas shakes his head. "Not if the man keeps looking. Not if he finds out which way they went." "We have to warn Edward," Sarah says. "Somehow." "How?" James asks practically. "We don't know where he is." The children fall silent, the magnitude of the situation overwhelming them. They're just children, faced with an adult threat they barely comprehend. And yet, they're the only ones who know the truth, the only ones who might be able to help their friend. "The whistle," Lucy says suddenly. "Remember what Edward said? His father told him he'd know what to do with the key when the time was right. But Edward has the whistle," Bobby points out. "And he's gone." "No," Lucy says, her eyes wide with remembered knowledge. "No, he gave it to me, right before he left with his uncle. He pressed it into my hand and whispered, 'Keep it safer than I did.'" The others stare at her in astonishment. "You have the whistle? With the key?" Thomas asks. "Where is it?" Lucy reaches into the pocket of her pinafore and pulls out the small metal whistle on its frayed cord. "Right here. I've been carrying it with me every day, just like Edward did." The children gather around, looking at the whistle with new understanding. It's not just a memento of their friend. It's the very thing the men from Chicago are searching for. "If the man finds out you have it," Sarah begins, unable to finish the thought. "He won't. Thomas says firmly. We'll hide it. Somewhere no one would think to look. But what about Edward? Eleanor asks. If he gave the whistle to Lucy, he doesn't have the key anymore. How will he open whatever it is he's supposed to open? Maybe that's the point, James suggests slowly. Maybe he knew the men would keep chasing him as long as they thought he had the key. By giving it to Lucy, he's protecting it, and himself. Or maybe, Sarah says, her analytical mind working through the problem, he wants us to figure out what the key opens, to finish what his father started. The children look at one another, the weight of this new responsibility settling over them. They're no longer just keeping Edward's secret. They're actively involved in his story, entrusted with the very object that set it in motion. So what do we do? Bobby asks. Thomas takes a deep breath, decision crystallizing in his eyes. We find out what the key opens. We do what Edward and his father couldn't do. We stop running, and we fight back. The narrator's voice returns, grave and knowing. There are moments that define us, choices that set us on paths from which there is no return. For these 6 children, standing by a creek on a gray August day in 1915, that moment had arrived. They had been drawn into a story larger and darker than anything in their experience. A story of corruption, of murder, of secrets worth killing for. And now they had to decide, walk away and preserve what remained of their innocence, or step forward into danger for the sake of a friend who had already lost his. September arrives, bringing with it the start of the school year and a new rhythm to the children's days. They attend classes, do their chores, behave outwardly as any children their age would. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, they are changed, warier, more watchful, burdened with knowledge no adult would suspect they possess. The man from Chicago has not reappeared, but they know he's still in Milbrook. Thomas has spotted him outside the hotel, smoking a cigarette with casual elegance. Sarah has seen him in conversation with the telegraph operator. James caught a glimpse of him watching the schoolyard during recess, his gaze moving methodically from child to child. He's looking for Edward, unaware that his quarry has already fled. Or perhaps more worryingly, he knows Edward is gone and is now searching for the key, suspecting it might have been left behind. The children keep the whistle hidden, rotating its location daily to reduce the risk of discovery. One day it's buried in Lucy's mother's garden, the next it's sealed in a jar and submerged in the creek, the next it's hidden in a hollow brick in the school's foundation. Always, it's carefully recovered and moved before anyone can notice its presence. Meanwhile, they try to solve the mystery of what the key might open. They visit the bank, asking innocent-seeming questions about safety deposit boxes. They explore the old Thatcher house, now the Sullivan house, peering through windows at locks that might fit their tiny key. They even consider the possibility that the key might open something back in Chicago, something Edward's father had hidden before his death. The weeks pass, and with them, the children's hope of finding an answer dwindles. The man from Chicago maintains his vigil in Milbrook, his patience a testament to the importance of his mission. The children continue their precautions, their secret meetings, their futile investigations. And then, just as they're beginning to think the mystery might never be solved, a letter arrives. It comes to the general store, addressed to Mr. Hammond, but with a smaller envelope inside marked, "For Lucy." Mr. Hammond, puzzled but seeing nothing suspicious about a letter for his daughter, brings it home and presents it to her at dinner. "Looks like you've got a pen pal, Lou," he says good-naturedly. No return address, though. Lucy opens the envelope with trembling fingers, instantly recognizing the careful handwriting from notes passed in the treehouse. Inside is a single sheet of paper with a short message. "Dear Lucy, I hope this finds you well. Uncle Michael and I are settled in our new home. It rains more here than in Milbrook, but the people are kind. I think of all of you often, especially when I see a tree that would be perfect for a house like ours. Uncle Michael is working at a factory now. He seems less worried, but still checks the locks twice each night. I hope you're keeping our special whistle safe. Remember how my father's brother worked at the place where they keep all the town's important papers? Maybe there's someone like that in Milbrook, too. Your friend always, Edward." Lucy reads the letter silently, then excuses herself from the table, saying she needs to finish her homework. The moment she's alone in her room, she reads the letter again, this time looking beyond the surface message for the clues she's sure Edward has hidden there. The next morning, she shares the letter with her friends on the walk to school, their heads bent together over the precious page. "He's alive," Sarah says, relief evident in her voice. "And safe, it seems. But where is he?" asks Bobby. "He doesn't say. Somewhere rainy," James notes. "Could be anywhere. That's not the important part," Thomas says, tapping the letter. Look at what he says about his father's brother and the town's important papers. That's a clue. The others read the passage again. Does Edward have an uncle who worked with papers? Eleanor asks, confused. No, Thomas says, excitement building in his voice. He's talking about public records, town halls, courthouses, places where they keep deeds, birth certificates, official documents. The county records office? Sarah breathes, understanding dawning. In the courthouse basement. That's what the key opens, Lucy says. Something in the records office. Something Edward's father wanted to preserve. But what? James wonders. We won't know until we look, Thomas says decisively. We need to get into that records office. How? Bobby asks. We can't just walk in and start trying our key in every lock we see. No, Thomas agrees. But my father goes to the courthouse every Tuesday for the town council meeting. I often go with him and wait in the lobby while he attends. No one would think it strange if I wandered down to the basement. The plan takes shape quickly after that. Thomas will visit the courthouse with his father that afternoon. While the meeting is in session, he'll slip down to the records office. The others will wait nearby, ready to create a distraction if necessary. The courthouse is the imposing stone building in the center of town, with wide steps leading to heavy oak doors. Thomas and his father ascend these steps at precisely 2 o'clock, Thomas's heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. You sure you don't want to sit in on the meeting today, son? His father asks as they enter the marble-floored lobby. Might be educational. No thank you, father, Thomas replies, trying to keep his voice casual. I brought a book. He pats his satchel, which contains not only a book, but also the whistle with its hidden key. Suit yourself, his father says with a shrug. I shouldn't be more than an hour. Stay in the lobby where I can find you. Thomas nods obediently and takes a seat on one of the wooden benches that line the lobby walls. He waits until his father has disappeared into the council chamber, then counts slowly to 100, giving the meeting time to get properly underway. When he's certain no one is watching, he slips from the bench and makes his way to the staircase that leads to the basement. The stairs are dimly lit, the air growing cooler as he descends. At the bottom is a long corridor with several doors. A sign on one reads, County Records, Authorized Personnel Only. Thomas tries the handle. Locked, as expected. He looks around, confirming he's alone, then pulls out the whistle. With slightly shaking hands, he pries it open and removes the tiny key. The key is old and tarnished. Its design simple but elegant. Thomas approaches the door, then hesitates. What if it doesn't fit? What if all their planning, all their hope, leads nowhere? Taking a deep breath, he inserts the key into the lock. It doesn't turn. Disappointment floods through him, but he pushes it aside. There must be other locks in the records office. He just needs to get inside. Looking around again, Thomas spots a window at ground level, partially hidden by bushes. It's small, but so is he. Moving quickly, he returns to the stairs, exits the courthouse, and makes his way around to the side of the building. The window is old, its latch rusted. With a bit of effort, Thomas manages to work it open enough to squeeze through. He drops down into a storage room filled with shelves of dusty boxes and files. The main records office lies beyond another door, this one mercifully unlocked. Thomas enters cautiously, finding himself in a large room lined with filing cabinets, shelves of ledgers, and several desks. The room is empty of people. The records clerk must be at lunch or running an errand. Thomas moves through the room, examining locks, looking for anything that might match their key. Filing cabinets, desk drawers, storage boxes, all have locks too large for the tiny key from the whistle. He's about to give up when he notices a small safe built into the wall behind the main desk. It's old, predating the more modern filing systems that fill the rest of the room, and its keyhole is small, delicate, a perfect match for their key. Heart racing, Thomas approaches the safe and inserts the key. It slides in smoothly, and when he turns it, there's a satisfying click. The safe door swings open. Inside is a single envelope, yellowed with age, sealed with wax that has cracked and faded. Written on the front, in faded ink, is a name, Sullivan. Thomas stares at it, hardly daring to believe they've succeeded. This must be what Edward's father wanted to protect, what the men from Chicago have been hunting for. With trembling hands, he takes the envelope and slips it into his satchel. He's just closed the safe and pocketed the key when he hears footsteps in the corridor outside. Panic seizes him. If he's discovered here, there will be questions he can't answer, consequences he can't face. Moving silently, Thomas returns to the storage room and the open window. He's halfway through when the door to the records office opens. Not pausing to see who's entered, he wriggles the rest of the way out, pulls the window closed behind him, and runs. He doesn't stop running until he reaches their designated meeting place, a cluster of trees on the courthouse lawn where the others are waiting anxiously. "Did you find it?" Bobby asks immediately. "Did the key work?" Thomas, still catching his breath, nods and pats his satchel. "It opened a safe. There was an envelope inside with the name Sullivan on it. Have you looked at what's in it?" Sarah asks. Thomas shakes his head. "Not yet. I thought we should all see it together." "Not here," Eleanor says, glancing around nervously. "Someone might see." "The treehouse," James decides. "After dinner, we'll meet at the treehouse." The rest of the day passes with excruciating slowness. The children sit through their afternoon classes, help with chores at home, eat dinner with their families, all while their minds are fixed on the envelope in Thomas's satchel and the secrets it might contain. As dusk falls, they make their excuses and slip away to the treehouse, converging from different directions to avoid drawing attention. Once inside, with the lantern lit and the trapdoor secured, Thomas removes the envelope from his satchel and places it in the center of their circle. "Should we open it?" Lucy asks, her voice hushed with reverence. "We have to," Thomas says. "It's the only way to help Edward." Carefully, he breaks the seal and opens the envelope. Inside are several sheets of paper covered in neat, precise handwriting, along with what appear to be financial ledgers and a newspaper clipping. Sarah, the most studious of the group, takes the papers and begins to read aloud. "To whom it may concern, my name is William Sullivan. I was, an accountant for Continental Shipping and Import in Chicago, Illinois. What follows is my testimony regarding illegal activities I have witnessed in the course of my employment, specifically the smuggling of opium, unlicensed firearms, and human beings into the United States through shipping channels controlled by Continental and its subsidiaries." Sarah pauses, looking up at the others with wide eyes. "This is evidence of crimes." "Keep reading," Thomas urges. Sarah continues, her voice growing more troubled as she progresses through William Sullivan's detailed account of corruption, bribery, and violence. He names names: powerful men in Chicago business and politics, police officials who accept payoffs to look the other way, dock workers who disappear after asking too many questions. "I have kept duplicate records of all transactions mentioned herein," Sarah reads from the final page. "These are enclosed with my testimony. I have placed this information in safekeeping, to be revealed only in the event of my death or disappearance. If you are reading this, I am likely already gone. I ask only that justice be done, not just for me, but for all those who have suffered at the hands of this organization. William Sullivan, September 3rd, 1914. A heavy silence falls over the treehouse as Sarah finishes reading. The children look at one another, the full weight of what they've discovered settling upon them. "Edward's father was trying to expose criminals," Eleanor says finally. "Powerful criminals. And they killed him for it," adds Bobby, his usual exuberance subdued by the gravity of the situation. "They've been chasing Edward because they thought he had this evidence," James realizes, "or the key to find it. But Edward gave the key to us," Lucy says. "To me. He trusted us with it, and now we have the evidence," Thomas says slowly. "The question is, what do we do with it?" It's a question none of them is equipped to answer. They're children, faced with a responsibility that would challenge even the most principled adult. The documents in their possession could bring down powerful men, could expose a network of crime that spans cities and states. But using them means stepping out of the shadows, putting themselves, and possibly Edward, in the path of danger. "We need help," Sarah says finally. "Adult help. Someone we can trust." "My father," Thomas begins. "No," James interrupts. "No offense, Thomas, but your father is the mayor. He's a politician. We don't know who he might be connected to, who he might feel obligated to inform." "What about my father?" Sarah suggests. "He's a teacher. He has no political connections." "But does he have the authority to do anything with this information?" Eleanor asks practically. "Would anyone listen to him?" The children debate back and forth, each suggestion meeting with a new objection. Every adult they can think of either lacks the necessary authority or might have connections they can't risk. "What about the newspaper?" Bobby suggests suddenly. "The editor, Mr. Brooks. He's always writing those angry articles about corruption in government. He'd know what to do with this. The others consider this possibility. The Milbrook Gazette is small but respected, its editor known for his uncompromising stance on matters of public interest. It could work, Thomas says slowly. If Mr. Brooks published the evidence, it would be public. The men from Chicago couldn't suppress it then. But would he believe us? Lucy asks. We're just children. He wouldn't have to believe us, Sarah points out. The evidence speaks for itself. William Sullivan's testimony, the financial records, they tell their own story. So we take this to Mr. Brooks. James summarizes. And then what? What about Edward? He's still out there somewhere, still in danger if the men from Chicago think he knows about this evidence. We need to get a message to him, Thomas decides. Tell him what we found, warn him to be careful. But how? Eleanor asks. We don't know where he is. Lucy pulls Edward's letter from her pocket. He sent this to me through the general store. Maybe we could send something back the same way. There's no return address, Sarah reminds her. The letter could have been mailed from anywhere. The children fall silent again, the magnitude of the problem threatening to overwhelm them. They have the evidence, but using it might put Edward in greater danger. Not using it means the men who killed his parents go unpunished, free to continue their crimes. We need to do both, Thomas says finally. We take the evidence to Mr. Brooks, and we find a way to warn Edward. How? The others ask in unison. Thomas looks at the newspaper clipping that came with William Sullivan's testimony. It's an article about Continental Shipping and Import, featuring a photograph of the company's board of directors, stern-faced men in expensive suits, standing before an impressive building. We'll put an advertisement in the newspaper, he says slowly, the plan forming as he speaks. A message that would mean nothing to anyone except Edward. Something about a whistle or a treehouse. Something that would tell him the key worked, that we found what his father hid. And if the men from Chicago see it, James asks. They won't know what it means, Thomas assures him. Only Edward will understand. The plan isn't perfect, but it's the best they can devise with their limited resources and experience. They agree to meet the next day after school, to go together to the Milbrook Gazette office and speak with Mr. Brooks. What they don't know, as they carefully reseal the envelope and extinguish the lantern, is that they're already too late. The man from Chicago has been watching them more closely than they realized, his patience finally rewarded by the sight of Thomas emerging from the courthouse with a bulging satchel and a look of triumph that no child his age could entirely conceal. The man has followed Thomas to the treehouse, has listened from below as Sarah read William Sullivan's testimony aloud. And now, as the children descend the ladder and head for their homes, he slips away to make preparations of his own. The narrator's voice returns, now urgent and foreboding. The innocence of childhood is a fragile thing, easily shattered by the harsh realities of the adult world. These 6 children, who had begun their summer building a treehouse and ended it uncovering evidence of murder and corruption, stood now at the threshold of a danger they could not fully comprehend. The shadows that had haunted Edward had found new targets, and the coming dawn would bring with it a reckoning none of them were prepared to face. The next day dawns gray and misty, the sun struggling to break through clouds, heavy with unshed rain. The children meet at the school gates as usual, their faces solemn with the responsibility they've taken upon themselves. Did you bring the envelope? Sarah asks Thomas in a whisper as they walk to class. Thomas pats his satchel. Right here, safe and sound. We'll go to the newspaper office right after school, James reminds them. All of us together. My mother expects me home by 4, Eleanor frets. She's teaching me to make apple preserves today. This is more important than preserves, Bobby says bluntly. Tell her you're staying late to help the teacher. Eleanor looks shocked at the suggestion of lying, but nods reluctantly. I suppose, just this once. The school day passes with agonizing slowness. The children struggle to focus on their lessons, their minds constantly returning to the envelope in Thomas's satchel and the plan they've set in motion. By the time the final bell rings, their nerves are stretched to breaking point. They gather in the schoolyard, counting heads to make sure everyone is present. Where's Lucy? Thomas asks, noticing the youngest member of their group is missing. She was in class, Sarah says, looking around in confusion. I saw her just before the bell. Maybe she went to the bathroom, suggests Bobby. They wait, but Lucy doesn't appear. After 5 minutes, Sarah goes to check the girls' washroom, returning with a shake of her head. She's not there, and her coat and books are gone from the cloakroom. A sense of unease settles over the group. It's not like Lucy to wander off without telling them, especially not today of all days. Maybe she went ahead to the newspaper office, Eleanor suggests, though she doesn't sound convinced. Or home, adds Bobby. Maybe she wasn't feeling well. We should check, Thomas decides. Bobby and I will go to the Hammond house. The rest of you head to the Gazette office. We'll meet you there. The group splits up, Thomas and Bobby setting off at a quick pace toward the general store and the Hammond residence above it. When they arrive, they find Mr. Hammond behind the counter, serving a customer. "Afternoon, boys," he greets them when the customer leaves. "What can I do for you?" "We're looking for Lucy," Thomas explains. "She wasn't at the school gate after class. We thought she might have come straight home." A flicker of concern crosses Mr. Hammond's face. "She's not here. I haven't seen her since breakfast." "Maybe Mrs. Hammond picked her up from school?" Bobby suggests. Mr. Hammond shakes his head. "My wife's visiting her sister in Greenvale this week. Lucy knows to come straight to the store after school so I can keep an eye on her." His concern deepens visibly. "You say she was in class but disappeared afterward?" Thomas nods. "Just before the final bell. She was definitely there for the geography lesson." Mr. Hammond comes out from behind the counter, his usually jovial face now set in lines of worry. "We need to find her. She's only 8. She shouldn't be wandering around alone." He calls to his assistant to watch the store, then sets off with Thomas and Bobby to search for Lucy. They check her favorite spots, the creek, the library, the treehouse, but find no trace of her. By the time they meet up with the others at the Gazette office, Mr. Hammond's worry has blossomed into full-blown fear. "No one's seen her," he tells the group, which now includes Mr. Brooks, the newspaper editor, who has been drawn into the search. "It's like she vanished into thin air. We should inform the sheriff," Mr. Brooks suggests. "Organize a proper search party before it gets dark." As the adults discuss logistics, the children exchange significant glances. They know something the adults don't, about Edward, about the men from Chicago, about the evidence in Thomas's satchel. "Do you think?" Eleanor begins, unable to finish the terrible thought. "The man from the treehouse," James says quietly. "The one who was looking for Edward." Thomas feels a cold dread settling in his stomach. "We need to check something," he tells the others. "Right now." Understanding immediately, the children make an excuse to Mr. Hammond about checking one last place, then dash off toward Lucy's house. Once there, Thomas leads them around to the back garden, to the spot where Lucy most recently hid the whistle. The small metal container they used is still buried beneath the rose bush, but when Thomas digs it up and opens it, his worst fears are confirmed. The whistle is gone. "Someone took it," he says, his voice hollow with dread. "And I think they took Lucy too." "We have to tell Mr. Hammond," Sarah insists. "Tell him everything. About Edward, about the whistle, about the men from Chicago." "He'll never believe us," Bobby argues. "He'll think we're making up stories instead of helping find Lucy." "Then we show him the evidence," Thomas says, reaching for his satchel. "William Sullivan's testimony. That will make him believe us." But when he opens his satchel, a new shock awaits. The envelope is gone. "It was here this morning," Thomas says, frantically searching through his books and papers. "I checked before school. It was right here." "Could you have dropped it?" Eleanor asks. Thomas shakes his head. "I would have noticed. Someone must have taken it. Someone who knew I had it." The implication hangs heavy in the air. The man from Chicago hasn't just been watching them. He's been one step ahead of them all along. He's taken both the whistle and the evidence. And now it seems he's taken Lucy too. "Why would he take Lucy?" James asks, giving voice to the question they're all afraid to answer. "What use is she to him?" "Leverage," Sarah says softly. "If he thinks we have the evidence, or if he thinks we know where Edward is, we have to find her," Thomas says, his voice steady despite the fear churning inside him. Before he can't finish the sentence, can't put into words what might happen to Lucy at the hands of men who have already killed and tortured without remorse. "But how?" Eleanor asks. "We don't know where he would have taken her." Bobby, who has been unusually quiet, suddenly speaks up. "I think I might know. Remember last week when we were exploring the old mill by the river? I saw someone there, a man in a suit. I thought he was just a traveler taking shelter from the rain, but—" "The old mill," Thomas repeats. "It's isolated. No one goes there anymore since they built the new one upriver." "It's worth checking," James agrees. "But we should tell the adults. Mr. Hammond, the sheriff." "There's no time," Thomas interrupts. "If we start explaining everything, they'll ask questions, make us wait while they verify our story. And meanwhile, Lucy—" He swallows hard. "We have to go. Now. Just us." "That's crazy," Sarah protests. "We're children." What can we do against a grown man who's probably armed? We can be smarter than him, Thomas says. We know the area better than he does. We can create a distraction, get Lucy away while he's confused. Or we can at least confirm she's there, Eleanor adds. Then come back for help. The children argue back and forth, torn between the urgency of finding Lucy and the very real danger of confronting her captor themselves. In the end, they compromise. They'll go to the old mill, but only to observe. If they see Lucy, they'll send Bobby, the fastest runner, back to town for help, while the others keep watch. The old mill stands on the riverbank a mile outside town, its wooden structure weathered and sagging, its great wheel long since rotted away. As the children approach through the surrounding woods, they move with a caution born of fear, careful to stay hidden among the trees. There, James whispers, pointing to a sleek black automobile parked on the overgrown track that leads to the mill. That's not from around here. Thomas nods grimly. He's here, and I bet Lucy is too. They creep closer, staying low to the ground until they can see the mill's entrance. The door is closed, but a flicker of light is visible through one of the dusty windows, a lantern or candle burning inside. We need to get closer, Thomas says. See if we can look through a window, confirm Lucy's in there. I'll go, James volunteers. I'm the quietest. Before the others can protest, James is slipping through the underbrush, making his way toward the mill with the stealth of a child who has spent years perfecting the art of moving undetected. The others watch anxiously as he reaches the building, edges along its wall, and carefully peers through a gap in the boarded-up window. What he sees makes his blood run cold. Lucy is there, tied to a chair in the center of the mill's main floor. She appears unharmed but terrified, her eyes wide and tear-stained. Standing before her is the man from Chicago, impeccably dressed as always, a cigarette dangling from his fingers. He's speaking to Lucy, his tone conversational, but James is too far away to make out the words. More disturbing is the presence of a second man, larger, rougher-looking, who stands by the door, arms crossed over his massive chest. This isn't just one man they're dealing with, but two. James returns to the group as quickly and quietly as he left, his face pale with what he's seen. She's in there, he confirms in a whisper. Tied up, but she looks okay. But there are two men, not just the one we've seen before. And the second one, he's big, really big. The children absorb this information with growing dread. One man against 6 children might have offered some slim hope of success. Two men, one of them described as massive, changes the equation dramatically. Bobby, Thomas says, making a swift decision. Run back to town. Find Mr. Hammond, the sheriff, anyone who can help. Tell them Lucy's being held at the old mill by kidnappers. What about the rest of you? Bobby asks, already poised to run. We'll stay here. Keep watch, Thomas assures him. We won't try anything stupid. Just hurry. Bobby nods and takes off through the woods, moving with a speed born of desperate urgency. The remaining children settle in to wait, their eyes fixed on the mill, their hearts pounding with fear for their friend. Inside the mill, Lucy sits very still, trying not to cry, trying to be brave like she thinks Thomas or James would be. The ropes around her wrists and ankles are tight, painful, but she doesn't complain. She doesn't want to give the men the satisfaction. Now, one more time, little girl, the well-dressed man says, his voice soft but menacing. Where is Edward Sullivan? I told you, Lucy says, her voice surprisingly steady. He left town weeks ago. I don't know where he went. But he gave you something before he left, didn't he? The man persists. A whistle. A very special whistle with a key inside. Lucy's eyes widen slightly. She can't help it. How does he know about the whistle? The man smiles, seeing her reaction. Ah, so it's true. Well, we have the whistle now. He pulls it from his pocket, dangling it before her. And we have the evidence your friend Thomas so helpfully retrieved from the courthouse. He gestures to the envelope on a nearby table. The only thing we're missing is Edward himself. Why do you want him? Lucy asks, unable to contain her curiosity despite her fear. He's just a boy who saw something he shouldn't have, the man replies. A boy who could identify certain business associates of mine. That makes him dangerous. He's not dangerous, Lucy protests. He's just scared. You hurt him. You killed his parents. The man's expression doesn't change, but something cold enters his eyes. Children should be seen and not heard, he says softly. Or in Edward's case, neither seen nor heard, permanently. Lucy feels a chill run through her at these words. This man intends to kill Edward, just as he killed Edward's parents. And now that he has the whistle and the evidence, there's nothing to stop him. Nothing except, he's not coming back, she says suddenly. Not ever. He told me in his letter. They've gone too far away for you to find them. Letter? The man's interest sharpens. What letter? Lucy realizes her mistake too late. Just a goodbye letter. It didn't say where they were going. I think you're lying, little girl. The man steps closer, looming over her. I think Edward told you exactly where he was going, and you're going to tell me. I don't know, Lucy insists, tears beginning to well in her eyes despite her best efforts. I swear I don't know. Everyone knows something, the man says, reaching into his jacket and pulling out a small, sharp knife. It's just a matter of finding the right motivation to make them share it. Outside, the waiting children see the last of the day's light fading from the sky. Bobby has been gone for nearly half an hour. Surely he must have reached town by now. Raise the alarm. Help should be on the way. It's getting dark, Eleanor whispers. Should we light the lantern? Not yet, Thomas advises. The light might be seen from the mill. They continue their vigil in growing darkness, straining their eyes to keep the mill in sight. The windows glow faintly with the light from within, but they can no longer make out any movement. Something's wrong, Sarah says suddenly. It's been too long. Help should have arrived by now. Maybe Bobby got lost in the dark, James suggests, though he doesn't sound convinced. Or maybe he couldn't get anyone to believe him, Thomas says grimly. A story about kidnappers and a missing girl. It might have sounded like a prank. So what do we do? Eleanor asks, fear evident in her voice. We can't just leave Lucy in there. Thomas is quiet for a long moment, weighing their options, all of which seem impossible. Then he says, we need a diversion. Something to draw at least one of the men outside, even if just for a few minutes. Like what? James asks. Thomas looks at the automobile parked near the mill. That car. If we could damage it somehow, make it unusable. The tires, Sarah suggests. If we let the air out of the tires, they'd be stranded here. Good, Thomas approves. And maybe we could start a small fire. Not close enough to spread to the mill, but enough to create smoke, confusion. That's dangerous, Eleanor protests. So is doing nothing, Thomas counters. If those men get away with Lucy, he doesn't need to finish the thought. They all understand what's at stake. Working quickly, quietly, they gather dry branches and leaves, creating a small pile some distance from the mill but where the smoke will be visible from its windows. James, who always carries a small pocket knife, is tasked with deflating the automobile's tires. Sarah and Eleanor gather more combustible material, while Thomas keeps watch on the mill. They're just about ready when a sound from the direction of town makes them all freeze. Voices approaching through the woods. For a moment, hope surges. Has Bobby returned with help after all? But as the voices grow closer, they realize with horror that it's not help coming, but a third man, pushing Bobby ahead of him at gunpoint. Found this one running toward town, the newcomer announces as they emerge into the clearing before the mill. Thought he might be connected to our little situation. The mill door opens and the well-dressed man steps out, cigarette still in hand. Well, he says, eyeing Bobby with cold amusement. Another of Edward's little friends. Bring him inside. Bobby's eyes dart frantically around the clearing, seeking his hidden companions. Run, he shouts suddenly. Run, they have His warning is cut short as the man behind him clamps a hand over his mouth and drags him struggling into the mill. The remaining children crouch in the underbrush, frozen with indecision and fear. There are 3 men now, all armed. The situation has gone from desperate to impossible. We have to go for help, Sarah whispers urgently. All of us, right now. It's our only chance. Thomas nods, his earlier determination giving way to the cold reality of their position. You're right. We can't help them like this. We need adults, weapons. They begin to back away, moving as silently as possible when a scream pierces the night. Lucy's voice high and terrified. Thomas stops. I can't, he says, his voice breaking. I can't leave them. Thomas, be reasonable, Sarah pleads. What can we possibly do against 3 armed men? Thomas looks at the small pile of kindling they've gathered, at James's pocket knife, at the woods around them that they know like the backs of their hands after a summer of exploration. We can be smarter than them, he says, an echo of his earlier confidence returning. We know this area. They don't, and they're not expecting us. What are you thinking? James asks, recognizing the look of determination on his friend's face. I'm thinking, Thomas says slowly, that it's time we stopped running and started fighting back, just like Edward's father tried to do. Inside the mill, Lucy and Bobby sit side by side, both now bound to chairs. The three men confer in low voices near the door, occasionally casting glances at their young captives. Are you okay? Bobby whispers to Lucy. Did they hurt you? Lucy shakes her head. Not yet, she whispers back, but they keep asking about Edward, about where he is, and they found the whistle. Bobby's face pales. Did you tell them anything about the letter? They know about it, Lucy admits, her voice trembling. But I didn't tell them what was in it. I said it was just a goodbye. The well-dressed man breaks away from the group and approaches the children, his polished shoes clicking on the wooden floor. Discussing escape plans, are we? He asks, his voice deceptively pleasant. I'm afraid that would be quite impossible. He pulls up a chair and sits facing them, close enough that they can smell his cologne, something expensive and foreign. Now, let's try again. The letter from Edward Sullivan. Where is it, and what exactly did it say? I told you, Lucy says, summoning what courage remains. It was just a goodbye letter. It didn't say where they were going. The man studies her face, his eyes cold and calculating. You know, children are terrible liars. Your eyes give you away every time. He turns to Bobby. Perhaps your friend will be more cooperative. I don't know anything about a letter, Bobby says truthfully. No? The man raises an eyebrow. But you know Edward Sullivan. You know what he looks like, where he lived, who he associated with. He pauses, letting the words sink in. You know enough to be useful. The larger man steps forward. We're wasting time, Frank. The boss wants this wrapped up tonight. The well-dressed man, Frank, waves a dismissive hand. The boss isn't here, Malone. I am. And I say we take our time, do this properly. He turns back to the children. We have all night after all. Outside, Thomas has gathered the others close, outlining his plan in urgent whispers. We can't take on all three at once, he explains. But if we can separate them, create enough confusion. How? Sarah asks skeptically. Thomas points to the pile of kindling they've gathered. We start there. A fire. Not too close to the mill, but big enough to be noticed. That might draw at least one of them out. And then what? Eleanor asks. James and I will circle around to the back of the mill. There's a loading door there, probably locked or barred, but we might be able to force it. If we can get inside while at least one man is distracted by the fire. It's too dangerous, Sarah protests. Even if you get in, there are still men with guns in there. Which is why we need more distractions. Thomas continues. Eleanor, once the fire is going and drawing attention, I need you to run to the road. Make as much noise as possible. Shout about a fire, about needing help. Make them think the whole town is on its way. They'll just shoot at her, Sarah argues. Not if they're planning to escape, Thomas counters. They won't want to draw more attention with gunshots. They'll be looking to get away, not create more problems. It's a tenuous plan, built on assumptions about how the men will react, but it's all they have. With Bobby and Lucy's lives at stake, even a desperate plan seems better than none. Sarah, Thomas says, turning to her, you'll be our lookout. If anything goes wrong, if you see anyone coming, give 2 owl hoots as a warning. Sarah nods reluctantly. She doesn't like the plan, but she can see the determination in Thomas's eyes. There will be no talking him out of it. All right, Thomas says, taking a deep breath. Let's begin. Inside the mill, Frank has moved away from the children, returning to his consultation with the other men. Bobby works silently at the ropes binding his wrists, twisting and pulling whenever he thinks no one is looking. The ropes are tight, but he's discovered a small bit of slack, enough that with persistence, he might work a hand free. Lucy watches the men, trying to hear their conversation, trying to understand what they plan to do with her and Bobby once they have the information they want. Whatever it is, she's certain it isn't good. We should just take them back to Chicago, the third man is saying. The boss will know how to make them talk. And risk being seen with 2 children all the way from Pennsylvania to Illinois? Frank shakes his head. Too risky. We handle this here tonight, then disappear. The local yokels will spend weeks searching these woods, but by then, we'll be long gone. The implication is clear, even to Lucy's 8-year-old mind. The men don't intend for her or Bobby to be found. Not alive, at least. A sudden glow from outside catches everyone's attention. An orange light flickering through the mill's dusty windows, growing brighter by the second. What the hell is that? Malone, the large man, moves to the window. Fire! There's a fire out there! Frank joins him, peering out into the darkness. It's some distance away, probably just a campfire. In these woods? At night? Malone sounds skeptical. Could be a signal. Maybe the brat wasn't alone. Frank considers this, then nods. Check it out. Take Donnelly with you. He gestures to the third man. I'll watch the children. Malone and Donnelly grab their guns and head for the door, their faces grim with purpose. The moment they step outside, a shrill voice cuts through the night. Fire! Fire in the woods! Help! Somebody help! Eleanor's performance is convincing, the voice of a terrified child, carrying clearly in the still night air. The two men hesitate, then move toward the sound, guns raised. At the back of the mill, Thomas and James work frantically at the loading door. It's barred from the inside, but years of neglect have weakened the wood around the hinges. With the knife and a sturdy branch as a lever, they manage to create a small gap, just enough for a skinny child to squeeze through. I'll go, James whispers. I'm smaller. Thomas nods, helping to widen the gap as much as possible. Be careful. Get to Bobby and Lucy if you can, but don't take any risks if that man is still in there. James takes a deep breath, then wriggles through the gap, dropping silently onto the dusty floor inside. He crouches in the shadows, letting his eyes adjust to the dim interior. The mill is a cavernous space with ancient machinery looming like sleeping giants in the darkness. A single lantern burns near the front, where Frank paces back and forth before the bound children. James moves cautiously from shadow to shadow, using the hulking shapes of forgotten equipment as cover. He's nearly halfway to Bobby and Lucy when a floorboard creaks beneath his foot. Frank whirls around, gun drawn. Who's there? James freezes, hardly daring to breathe. Frank's eyes scan the darkness, searching for the source of the sound. If that's another of Edward's little friends, Frank calls into the shadows. You might as well come out now. Save us all some trouble. When no one appears, Frank's attention shifts to the bound children. More of your friends, I presume? How many of you are there? Neither Bobby nor Lucy answer, their eyes fixed on the gun in Frank's hand. No matter, Frank says with a cold smile. We'll find them all eventually. Malone and Donnelly will see to that. Outside, Eleanor continues her performance, leading Malone and Donnelly on a merry chase through the darkened woods. She stays just ahead of them, just visible enough to keep them following, but never close enough to be caught. It's a dangerous game, but she plays it well, using her intimate knowledge of the terrain to her advantage. The fire, meanwhile, has grown, spreading to nearby underbrush despite Thomas's attempts to control it. The dry summer has left the woods susceptible to flame, and what was meant as a distraction is becoming a genuine threat. Sarah, from her lookout position, watches with growing alarm as the fire expands. Soon, it will be beyond their ability to manage, a danger not just to the men from Chicago, but to the entire forest, and perhaps even Milbrook itself. Inside the mill, James continues his cautious approach, moving from shadow to shadow. He's close enough now to catch Bobby's eye, to signal his presence with a small wave. Bobby sees him and gives an almost imperceptible nod, then resumes working at his bonds with renewed vigor. Frank, meanwhile, has become aware of the growing light from the fire. He moves to the window, concern etched on his features as he sees the flames spreading through the dry underbrush. Damn it, he mutters. Those idiots should have put that out by now. The distraction is just what James needs. He darts forward, reaching Bobby's side, his pocket knife already open and ready. Hold still, he whispers, sawing at the ropes that bind Bobby's wrists. Frank turns at the sound, raising his gun. You! James freezes, knife in hand, caught in the act. For a moment, time seems to stand still, a tableau of child and man, of innocence confronting corruption, of desperation facing power. Then several things happen at once. Bobby, with one hand partially freed, lunges forward, toppling his chair and throwing off Frank's aim. The gun fires, the shot going wild, splintering the wooden beam above James's head. Outside, the sound of the gunshot spurs Thomas into action. He squeezes through the gap in the loading door, a heavy piece of mill equipment in his hands, a discarded gear, rusted but still solid. Sarah, hearing the shot, gives the warning signal. Two clear owl hoots that cut through the night. In the woods, Eleanor hears it too and changes direction, no longer leading Malone and Donnelly in circles, but straight toward the growing fire, hoping to trap them between the flames and the approaching help she's been shouting about. Inside the mill, chaos reigns. Bobby, now free but awkwardly tangled with his fallen chair, struggles to reach Lucy. James ducks behind a piece of machinery as Frank fires again, the bullet ricocheting off metal with a spark and whine. Thomas, seeing his opportunity, hefts the gear and throws it with all his strength. It strikes Frank's arm, sending the gun clattering across the floor. Frank curses, clutching his injured limb, his face contorted with rage. "Get Lucy!" Thomas shouts to James, who darts forward with his knife, sawing frantically at Lucy's bonds. Frank lunges for his fallen gun, but Bobby is there first, kicking it further away, then retreating as Frank turns his fury toward him. "You little bastards," Frank snarls. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." "We know exactly what we're dealing with," Thomas replies, his voice steadier than he feels. "A murderer, a man who kills parents and tortures children." Frank's face twists into something ugly, something barely human. "Edward told you, did he? Shared our little secret? Well, it won't matter soon. None of you will be talking to anyone after tonight." He reaches into his jacket and pulls out a second, smaller gun. Thomas's heart sinks. They hadn't accounted for this, hadn't imagined a man would carry 2 weapons. But before Frank can aim, the mill door bursts open. Thomas braces for Malone and Donnelly's return, for the end of their desperate rescue attempt. Instead, silhouetted against the growing firelight outside, stands a familiar figure, Michael Sullivan, Edward's uncle, a shotgun cradled in his arms. "That's far enough, Frank," Michael says, his voice cold as steel. "Put it down." Frank's eyes widen in shock, then narrow with calculation. "Michael Sullivan, what an unexpected pleasure. Come to tie up loose ends, have you?" "I said put it down," Michael repeats, stepping further into the mill, the shotgun never wavering. Frank seems to consider his options, then slowly lowers the pistol. "You're too late, you know. We found it. The evidence, the key, all of it." He gestures to the table where William Sullivan's testimony lies. "It's over, Michael. Your brother's crusade died with him." "No," Michael says quietly. "It didn't. It lives in Edward. And apparently," he glances at the children, "in his friends. During this exchange, James has managed to free Lucy." She stands on shaky legs, supported by Bobby and Eleanor, who has slipped in through the back entrance, having lost Malone and Donnelly in the woods. "We need to leave," Thomas says urgently. "The fire's spreading, and those other men will be back soon." Michael nods without taking his eyes off Frank. "Take the children out the back. Get them to safety." "What about you?" Thomas asks. "I'll be right behind you," Michael promises. "I just have some unfinished business with Mr. D'Angelo here." Thomas hesitates, torn between the need to get his friends to safety and the fear of leaving Michael alone with Frank. But the decision is made for him as smoke begins to seep into the mill, the fire having reached the outer walls. "Go," Michael insists. "Now." The children flee through the back entrance, Thomas pausing only long enough to grab William Sullivan's testimony from the table. Outside, the night is alive with flame, the forest a tapestry of orange and red as the fire consumes the dry undergrowth. "Which way?" James shouts over the roar of the blaze. "The creek," Thomas calls back. "If we can reach the water, we'll be safe." They run, half carrying Lucy, who is still weak from her ordeal. Behind them, the mill is rapidly being engulfed, the dry, aged wood providing perfect fuel for the hungry flames. As they reach the relative safety of the creek, wading into the cool water, a gunshot echoes from the burning mill, then another. The children freeze, looking back at the inferno, wondering who fired, who fell. And then, emerging from the smoke and flame like a figure from some ancient myth, comes Michael Sullivan, his clothes singed, his face blackened with soot, but alive. In his arms he carries something, a small, limp form. "Edward?" Lucy gasps, hope and fear mingling in her voice. But as Michael draws closer, they see it's not Edward he carries, but the whistle. Edward's grandfather's whistle with its hidden key. He holds it out to Thomas. "You've earned the right to keep this safe," he says, his voice rough with smoke and emotion. "All of you have." "Mr. Sullivan," Thomas begins. "The man, Frank, is no longer a concern." Michael cuts him off, his tone making it clear that no further questions should be asked. None of them are. As if to emphasize his point, a section of the mill's roof collapses in a shower of sparks and flame. Whatever happened inside will remain known only to Michael Sullivan. But there will be others, Michael continues. The organization Frank worked for doesn't forgive, and it doesn't forget. You children have put yourselves in danger by helping Edward, by finding the evidence. "We couldn't just do nothing," Sarah says simply. Michael looks at each of them in turn, his stern face softening slightly. No, I suppose you couldn't. Edward chose his friends well. The sound of voices and approaching lanterns turns their attention toward town. It seems Eleanor's cries for help, combined with the now visible glow of the forest fire, have finally brought the adults of Milbrook to investigate. What happens now? Bobby asks, looking from the burning mill to Michael Sullivan to the approaching search party. Now, Michael says, we tell a story. A simple story about children playing with fire that got out of hand, about a vacant mill that caught flame. Nothing about men from Chicago, nothing about Edward or his father's evidence. But the truth, Thomas begins. The truth, Michael interrupts, would put all of you in the same danger that follows Edward and me. Is that what you want? For men like Frank to come looking for your families? The children exchange glances, understanding the gravity of what Michael is asking. It's not just about their safety, but the safety of everyone they love. We'll keep your secret, Thomas says finally. But what about Edward? Will he ever come back to Milbrook? Michael's face grows sad. No, it's not safe. Not anymore. We'll have to find somewhere new, somewhere further away. But he's alive? Lucy asks urgently. He's safe? He's alive, Michael confirms. And as safe as I can make him. That will have to be enough. The approaching lanterns are closer now, voices calling out names, the children's names, called by worried parents and neighbors. Soon they will have to face questions, create explanations, craft the story that Michael has suggested. Wait, Sarah says suddenly. The letter, Edward's letter to Lucy. It has his location, or at least clues to it. Michael's expression sharpens. Where is it? At my house, Lucy says. Hidden under my mattress. I'll need it, Michael says. And any other letters that might come. For Edward's safety and yours. Lucy nods, though sadness fills her eyes at the thought of losing this last connection to her friend. He won't forget you, Michael assures her, seeing her expression. Any of you. What you've done for him. It's more than most grown men would have dared. The search party is almost upon them now, led by Mr. Hammond and the sheriff, their faces tight with worry and confusion as they take in the scene. The burning mill, the smoke-stained children standing in the creek with a grim-faced stranger. Remember, Michael says quietly, a simple story, children playing, a fire that got out of hand, nothing more. The children nod, a solemn pact made in the flickering light of the flames. They will keep Edward's secret, carry his burden, honor his trust. It's a heavy responsibility for such young shoulders, but they've already proven themselves equal to challenges that would daunt most adults. Lucy! Mr. Hammond cries, splashing into the creek to gather his daughter in his arms. Thank God you're safe. We've been searching everywhere. As the other parents arrive, there are tears and embraces, relief and recrimination. The children stick to their story. They were playing in the woods, lost track of time, accidentally started a fire that spread to the mill. They're sorry, so sorry. They didn't mean for any of this to happen. The adults, overwhelmed with relief at finding their children safe, accept the explanation with minimal questioning. Only Sheriff Miller seems suspicious, his eyes moving from the children to Michael Sullivan and back again. And who might you be, sir? He asks Michael. Michael Sullivan, comes the calm reply. I was out for an evening walk when I saw the fire, found these children trapped by the flames and helped them reach the creek. Sullivan, the sheriff repeats, recognition dawning. Any relation to the Sullivans who left town a few weeks back? The man with the one-armed nephew? My brother and his son, Michael confirms smoothly. I've been staying at their house, keeping an eye on the property until they decide whether to return or sell. It's a plausible explanation, and with the chaos of the fire, now spreading rapidly through the woods requiring immediate attention, the sheriff has more pressing concerns than digging deeper into Michael Sullivan's story. As the adults organize a bucket brigade from the creek to the fire's edge, Michael draws Thomas aside. The evidence, he says quietly. William's testimony. Where is it? Thomas reaches into his shirt, where he tucked the envelope for safekeeping. It's damp from the creek water, but intact. He hands it to Michael, who tucks it securely inside his jacket. You've done a brave thing, Michael tells him. All of you have. But bravery doesn't always look like charging into a burning building. Sometimes it looks like keeping quiet, staying vigilant, remembering without speaking. Thomas nods, understanding what Michael is asking of them. We won't forget, he promises, and we won't tell. The narrator's voice returns, reflective and somber. Childhood ends not all at once, but in moments. Moments when the protected become protectors, when innocence gives way to understanding, when the simple stories adults tell to children are revealed as the half-truths they often are. For these 6 children, standing by a creek as flames consumed the old mill, and with it, the evidence of corruption they had uncovered, childhood ended on that September night in 1915. The scene shifts to 1 week later. The children are gathered in the treehouse, their sanctuary now touched with both sadness and a new sense of purpose. The forest fire was eventually contained, though a significant portion of the woods was lost. The old mill is nothing but charred ruins, its secrets reduced to ash. Michael Sullivan has disappeared, slipping away from Milbrook as quietly as he arrived. The official story, the one the children have maintained through questioning by parents, teachers, and the sheriff, is that they were playing with matches, started a fire accidentally, and were helped to safety by a passing stranger. No one mentions Edward, or the whistle, or the men from Chicago. No one speaks of William Sullivan's testimony or the organization it implicated. These are secrets the children carry alone, burdens they've chosen to bear for the sake of a friend they may never see again. "Do you think he made it?" Bobby asks, breaking the contemplative silence that has fallen over the group. "Edward and his uncle, do you think they got away safely?" Michael seemed pretty capable, Thomas says thoughtfully. "And he had the evidence, the whistle. Maybe he can use them somehow, find a way to stop running." "I hope so," Lucy says softly. "I hope Edward can have a normal life someday, make new friends, build a new treehouse. But never forget us," Eleanor adds with a small smile. "Never," Sarah agrees, "just like we'll never forget him." James, who has been unusually quiet, speaks up. "We should make a pact, here and now, that no matter what happens, no matter how old we get or where we go, we keep Edward's secret, protect him, even from a distance. And if he ever needs us again," Thomas adds, "if he ever comes back to Milbrook, we'll be here," Lucy finishes simply, ready to help. One by one, they place their hands in the center of their circle, a solemn vow made without fanfare, but with the full weight of their shared experience behind it. They are no longer just children who built a treehouse together. They are guardians of a truth too dangerous to speak aloud, protectors of a friend who carried too heavy a burden alone. As autumn deepens and the golden days of summer fade into memory, the children of Milbrook return to their regular routines. They attend school, help with chores, play games appropriate to their age. To the adults around them, they seem much the same as they were before, perhaps a bit more subdued, a bit more mindful of rules and consequences after the accident with the fire, but essentially unchanged. But those who look closely might notice differences: a new watchfulness in Thomas's eyes, a quiet determination in Sarah's bearing, a protective instinct in James that wasn't there before. They might observe how the 6 of them still gather daily, still maintain their tight-knit circle, but now with an awareness of the wider world and its dangers that most children their age lack. And sometimes, when they think no one is watching, they might be seen standing at the edge of the woods, looking toward the horizon, 7 in spirit if only 6 in body, waiting, remembering, honoring a promise made in fire and shadow on a night when childhood ended and something new began. The narrator's voice returns one final time, drawing the story to a close. Milbrook, Pennsylvania, September 1915, a place where 7 children once stood hand in hand at the edge of a golden field, their faces solemn in the fading light. 7 children bound by friendship, by trust, by secrets too heavy for such young hearts. 7 children, the last with an empty left sleeve that told a story of loss, of courage, of survival against impossible odds. The scene shifts to the present day, to an elderly woman sitting on a porch, watching the sunset. Her face is lined with age, her hands gnarled with arthritis, but her eyes are still bright, still observant. A small girl sits at her feet, looking up with curiosity. "Grandma Lucy," the child asks, "tell me again about your friends when you were little." Lucy Hammond, now Lucy Harrison, smiles down at her granddaughter. "Well, there were 6 of us: Thomas, Eleanor, Bobby, Sarah, James, and me." "But I thought there were 7, the child protests. "You always say 7 when you start the story." Lucy's smile turns wistful. "Yes, for one perfect summer, there were 7. The 7th was a boy named Edward, who taught us more about courage and friendship than anyone I've known since." "What happened to him?" the child asks. "Why did he leave?" Lucy looks out toward the horizon. toward the setting sun that paints the sky in shades of amber and gold. So like that distant summer evening when 7 children stood hand in hand at the edge of a field, he had to go away, she says simply, to keep a promise, to protect a secret. But in a way, he never really left us. We carried him with us, in our hearts, in our actions, in the people we became. Do you think he's still out there somewhere? The child asks, her imagination captured by this mysterious figure from her grandmother's past. Lucy's hand moves to her throat, where a small, tarnished whistle hangs on a chain. A whistle without its hidden key, kept as a memento of a friend long gone but never forgotten. I'd like to think so, she says softly. I'd like to think he found peace, found a place where he didn't have to run anymore, where the shadows couldn't reach him. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows across the porch, Lucy continues her story. A story of 7 children who held hands gently in the summer of 1915, before the world and its dangers intervened. A story of friendship and courage, of secrets kept and promises honored. A story that ends, as it began, with 7 children standing in a row, the last with an empty left sleeve that speaks of loss, but also of survival, of endurance, of hope that remains even when innocence is gone. The camera pulls back slowly, the porch growing smaller, the landscape expanding to show the town of Milbrook spread below, changed by the decades but still recognizable. And somewhere in the distance, beyond the horizon, beyond the reach of memory or vision, a one-armed man stands at another window, watching another sunset, remembering 6 friends who once made him feel, if only for a brief, golden summer, that he belonged. The screen fades to black, and the title appears one final time. 7 kids in 1915 hold hands gently, until you see the last one's left sleeve. End.